it's not what you might expect. Our civil rights history, it's not just one layer. You've got to know the things that led to the horrible disaster that was slavery, and then the things that happened that eventually culminated in the civil rights movement. But we're not done yet. We're never done on this. I believe you have to look at what these institutions are saying and doing to get an indication of where we're going, where we're headed. Because this is a common theme that has happened since the beginning of time. Commerce, religion, government, and science. If you look at them, you'll see patterns throughout history. And the patterns that need to be avoided involve collusion. It is the only way to prevent the evil that comes from a combination of these. You got to look when they start to collude. Everything from slavery to eugenics and genocide comes from the collusion of these things. They collude when there is a loss of individual rights because there's a crisis or there's a problem. They start to talk together and then the whole thing falls apart. Hopefully, America will avoid repeating the past mistakes. We've done it every single time we've pulled ourselves out. Now, I just showed you how some of these factors steered us into the deeper disaster of slavery. But now, how do we get out of slavery? It didn't happen with Abraham Lincoln. It just wasn't like, hey, let's stop slavery. Once we got waist deep into the quicksand of slavery, how did we climb out of it? Well, there are a few key things that helped us starting to get on the right track. But again, these things, they start to change and they start moving in the other direction. I've told you on the show before, we've talked a lot about George Whitefield. We've talked about him on the program quite a bit. He took trips from England and went through all the colonies, and he preached to anybody who would listen. While he was in the U.S., he sees that the colonists are becoming more and more materialistic. They wanted all kinds of imported stuff, candlesticks and all kinds of stuff, glassware, and this is Wedgwood china. Ooh. Well, Whitefield sees Wedgwood, I'm pretty sure it was the blue and white stuff, but he sees Wedgwood china. And he says, oh my gosh, America's on the wrong track. This is the golden calf. This, because people were thinking about the refined things in life. He realizes that America is losing touch with the Puritan lifestyle. Here you go, Aaron. And he knows that they got to get back to God. Now, understand that slavery and equal rights and humans are complex. Sometimes a good guy can also be a bad guy. Whitefield, he actually helped bring more slavery to America. He encouraged slavery at one point in his life. So how is he a good guy? Well, through his preaching, Whitefield reminded people of who the true arbiter of freedom was. God, not man, God. Whitefield planted the seeds, and those seeds would eventually bear fruit. Meanwhile, back in England, the guy who makes the china, Josiah Wedgwood, the pottery guy, he's living it up as the head of this uber successful company. Well, now, Wedgwood is an abolitionist. He's also a Quaker. Religion. Religion is starting to pull away from commerce and government. It goes back to religion again. By the beginning of the American Revolution, Quakers had moved from viewing slavery as a matter of individual choice to seeing the abolition of slavery as a Christian duty. The Quaker-led Society for Effecting the Abolition of the Slave Trade met in London in 1787. 3 of the members designed a seal to be engraved for the use of the society. This is it. This is the seal. Guess who made it? The guy who makes the china, Josiah Wedgwood, prominent member of the group. He mass markets this seal. It was arguably the most famous image of a black person in all of the 1700s. Wedgwood, the medallion, read, am I not a man and a brother? This image was reproduced on everything from bracelets to cigar boxes, everything. It was like, you know what it is? It's like the Lance Armstrong bracelet of the day. It was a flashpoint. It was a wake-up call for the abolitionists. 1740, government and religion now start to come apart. 1640, they collude to bring slavery. Whitefield comes, starts to wake people up, put religion back in its rightful place, pull it away from commerce and government and science. Commerce starts to pull away as well with Wedgwood, his wealth. He starts to fight against slavery, and the wheels begin to turn again. You can see that these things can be used for good when they're starting to question each other, and evil when they collude. One image was the symbol for a generation. Just like people and the Republicans and the Democrats, you can't always say that Democrats are always right, Republicans are always wrong. It doesn't work. People try to do their best, and people also change through generations. You can't say this guy was bad, but you can't say he was all good either. You can't say Wedgwood. Well, the Wedgwood name, what does the Wedgwood name mean? Wedgwood family inspires abolitionist with the medallion. 2 generations later, his great-grandson plants the seed that leads to progressivism, eugenics. You know who Wedgwood's grandson was? Charles Darwin, the father of modern-day racism. Back in a minute. There is a fight in this nation on whether America is good or bad, good or evil. Are we oppressors or are we victims? What are we? We're a little of everything, quite honestly, because we're people. You got to know what you believe. And America's it's not sunshine and lollipops. But no country is. The Republicans aren't the greatest. The Democrats aren't the greatest. They're not the worst. They switch places all the time. But it's a whitewashing of history that bothers me. How has the Democratic Party assumed the mantle of defender of minorities if you know their early history? Come with me. Dating to Andrew Jackson. This is the 17th century. We've taken you so rapidly. Again, I tell you that this is not complete history. This is just touching on some of the stuff that you don't know. And tomorrow we're going to take you into the 50s and 60s, and it'll blow your mind what you don't know. But again, not complete history. You've got to fill in all of the rest of it. Democrats like Andrew Jackson passed things like this, the Indian Removal Act. It is what it sounds like. It was a removal of Indians from the United States, just moving them someplace else, either willingly or by force. The removal of Native Americans through the Indian Removal Act, which Jackson signed into law in 1830, wasn't a problem for him because it's manifest destiny. We told you about this last night. It's a perversion of divine providence. It's the belief that America is destined, bestowed by God, to spread across North America. Now, if you believe that America is destined to be a shining city on the hill, a shining example, a blessing to the world, not by force, I'm with you. But if you're destined to break every treaty we made, the ends justify the means, wipe out entire populations, and we're given that right by God, you're out of your mind. Don't get me wrong. The Whigs initially opposed the concept of manifest destiny. It was the Democrats and the Whigs. But both of them did it. Both of them. Both of them helped along the way, and they both helped prolong slavery. So why is it now that so many people believe that the government would be the key to solving all of our racial problems in this country? It's the government that enslaved people in the first place. It was the government that lied to, wiped out the Indians. How is it all of a sudden the government is the good guy? That they're the answer to everything that's a problem? Why is it difficult for Americans to get their heads around where the real solutions come from? People! And it usually starts in church. In the 1800s, reform started in the churches. Remember, I told you this. Reform starts with this guy. Not a good guy entirely. And then it just takes off. Well, people knew that they couldn't continue to enslave other human beings and be right with God. Now, some people would put their head in the sand just like today. Some people, you're like, what? How are you doing this? Even before independence, Quakers and many other religious groups had argued that slavery was incompatible with the teachings of Christ. Our founders did the same thing. But it goes into the 1800s. The 1800s. 1835, the Ohio Anti-Slavery Society in Zanesville holds its first meeting. Now, these are religious whites who are vehemently opposed to slavery. And by the 1840s, Ohio abolitionists like Levi Coffin helped thousands of slaves escape to freedom on what you now know as the Ohio Underground Railroad.